I was into horse riding a lot as a child. So I used to do mounted games, which is you basically chucking yourself on and off ponies and reaching for things and going really fast. And I came off again and hit the same leg, and it like swelled up like a balloon again. And I was like, okay, it's come back. But then thankfully it went back into remission. So I was like, okay, that's it. That can be the worst that's ever happened to me, you know. It's like nothing can be worse than that. And then just as I was about to turn 16, I just got like a run-of-the-mill virus and just never got better. And just got worse and worse and worse and ended up bedbound. And then I was like, maybe I shouldn't have said that was the worst that was going to happen to me.
Welcome back to the Not Quite Pod. Today we've got Holly with us. Holly, do you just want to quickly introduce yourself and let everyone know who you are and a bit about yourself?
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Charlie. I'm Holly. Some people might know me as Onegirlandhercows on social media and everywhere else. I'm 27, live on a farm in Yorkshire, and I am an ambulatory wheelchair user and have been for, God, I've got to count now, 11 years now, since developing ME when I was 16. And I had a trial run before that for a couple of years in my teenage years. So I had like a trial run of being disabled and then got to go back to normal life and then bang. But other than that, I've had ME for the last 11 years and POTS, and I help out on our farm and I do all the secretary, like admin work nowadays. And try and connect people to their food online through social media and my blog, and basically try and bring farming to people who don't know anything about it, and also try and bring the countryside to people who, like me, was stuck in their bedrooms. Like I was in my bedroom for years and years and years without being able to leave, and it made me realise that other people don't have that countryside outside their window.
It's going to be a really interesting conversation because us two are like you say, we're like polar opposites. So I'm your stereotypical city boy, live just outside London. I do live near some fields, but it's nowhere near as rural as what you're used to. So this is going to be really interesting because I am a bit of a noob when it comes to farming and agriculture. So this is going to be a learning experience for myself.
Yeah.
But for anyone that doesn't know you, can you tell us a bit of your story this far? Like you briefly touched on it as you went through just there, but sort of your journey this far as to like growing up and then to sort of where you are now.
Yeah, absolutely. So I grew up on the farm and I was just like a typical healthy child, apart from I was hypermobile, and that was like on my records from like birth. But it didn't, they actually thought I had cerebral palsy at birth, but then like went through like a couple of years as a child, and then they were like, oh no, you don't actually. So, you know, I could have been joining you there. So
join the crew.
Yeah. So just like was a typical child. And then when I was a teenager, or just before I was a teenager, I injured my leg and developed complex regional pain syndrome, where I had like chronic pain in my leg and it all swelled up and just didn't want to move or anything. So I had that for like a year, and then I was one of the lucky ones that went into remission. I have no idea why still, but I injured it again, falling off a horse. I was into horse riding a lot as a child. So I used to do mounted games, which is you basically chucking yourself on and off ponies and reaching for things and going really fast. So there was a lot of injuries, and I came off again and hit the same leg, and it like swelled up like a balloon again. And I couldn't put it down, and it was like going on for another like couple of months. And I was like, okay, it's come back. But then thankfully it went back into remission. So I was like, okay, that's it. That can be the worst that's ever happened to me. You know, I had to be laid up for like a year. I was like, nothing can be worse than that. And then just as I was about to turn 16, I just got like a run-of-the-mill virus and just never got better. And just got worse and worse and worse and ended up bedbound. And then I was like, maybe I shouldn't have said that was the worst that was going to happen to me. Like, so regretted saying that. So then...
Careful what you wish for.
Exactly. I was like, I've dealt with that, you know. That everything must be plain sailing. And then the universe obviously thought, nope, don't be so stupid. So, so I ended up bedbound, got diagnosed quite quickly, to be fair, with ME within a year of first getting ill. And POTS, I was fainting and like feeling faint multiple times a day at the same time, which doctors at first were just like, oh, you're a teenage girl. It's just what you do, which was a bit strange.
How does that work?
Exactly. A teenage girl and trying to get out of GCSEs, apparently. Like they were the two at the beginning.
I'm still struggling to connect the dots between teenage girl fainting. I'm really struggling to wrap my head around that.
It was just like teenage girls faint. Like,
right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So after that, thankfully I had good doctors after that, and they diagnosed me quite quickly. And luckily I got onto a specialist clinic who weren't in our area, because I'm in Leeds, and they weren't actually in our area, but they were just starting up. And the director, like the specialist, had come from the Leeds clinic and gone over there. So I managed to get into them because they were the only ones that did house calls for ME patients who were severe and bedbound. And
wow.
If I hadn't been able to get in, the local clinic said that they can't look after anyone who's severe and is at home. Like, you're too severe for them, basically.
So what would have happened if you didn't have that service? That's quite scary.
Yeah, I'd have definitely, we've said before, that if I hadn't got in with them, we wouldn't have known what we were dealing with. So we'd have been because obviously I was a sporty, really fit and active, and coming from a farm, you've been working manual things all the time. So it was just I was just thinking oh, well, I'll just keep pushing. It can't be that bad.
Yeah.
So I was trying to push, and my version of pushing at that stage was to go and spend an hour downstairs. And we have a stair lift, so it wasn't even walking down the stairs. But I'd have carried on doing that and being, and who knows where I'd have ended up, to be fair. So I was so lucky to get in with them, and they gave me advice, and I stabilised and spent, I think, 6 or 7 years mostly bedbound in my bedroom, and then was really lucky to see some improvements to where I am now, which is I started being able to go outside. We got a powered wheelchair that would handle the farm, because obviously wheelchairs and farms do not go together.
Nope.
Nope. So we managed to get one, and slowly I've been able to access the farm more, but I'm mostly still farm bound, kind of. I can go out in the car to somewhere for an hour or so, and then that's it for the week or so, for 2 weeks. So I think that's where I am now. So while I was like that, I started the blog and stuff, and sharing on Instagram, mostly because before I started on Instagram, I'd spent, I think, 6 years just being ill, on my own, kind of thing, not saying anything to anybody. I kind of had to, I guess when you're not born disabled, you have to kind of come out as disabled, because nobody knew from the school years or anything, apart from a few friends. Everyone just thought I'd got better and moved on. So I had to kind of, I realised I couldn't just continue to have a persona online that wasn't who I actually was, and to be comfortable with being disabled and being disabled for the rest of my life.
It's always interesting. I always find it as someone, it's really my definition is really weird, because if you're being technical, I wasn't born disabled, but I was 4 weeks old. I don't know any different. So I always say I'm almost very grateful for that, because I don't know any different. So people come up to me and go, what's it like to be in a wheelchair? And I'm I don't know, what's it like to walk? And they're like, yeah, good question. And I'm like, exactly. It's a ridiculous question. But then again, coming back to the whole having the condition, growing up with it, there's so much more of a steeper learning curve, I feel when you develop a condition, especially you just said it was in your sort of mid-teen years, those years where you start doing stuff and start going out and seeing friends and doing this, that, the other, to then go from that to, okay, now I'm poorly, I've got to stay in bed all the time. It's quite an adjustment.
Yeah, it was like a big like grieving process for the life. Like I was a typical like planner. I was like literally had my life planned, which now seems a little bit silly to like think that you can plan your life. So it was like, oh, what do I do now? Like, this wasn't the plan.
Did that have? I'm imagining it's had a massive impact on your mental health. I'd imagine initially. I'd imagine you've adjusted as everyone sort of does, and we will go through our ups and downs. But I can imagine in that initial instance,
yeah, I think
it must have been pretty intense.
Initially, I was like, because I'd had the experience of having CRPS and going into remission, and being like one of the small percentage that go into remission, I think I had like a sense of, well, this will be the same. So they were like, the doctors that I saw were like, typically 5% of children recover completely. And I was like, I'll be that 5%, like, be fine. So I actually put my pony out on loan to another person so they could ride her, and did a 3-year loan and said, I'll have her back in 3 years and I'll be riding again and competing again. Like, it's just short term. Give me 3 years. It says the girl who was shut in her bedroom with the blinds closed and couldn't even have visitors. Like,
yeah.
Like, yeah. So at first I was like in total denial, and then I think as I got like 18 and everyone went off to uni, it then really hit that I wasn't getting better and that I wasn't living that life. And then, like you say, you get used to it and you make the most of things, and then like milestones come around, don't they? And you see people doing things, like at the moment people are having children in my like friendship group and buying houses and stuff, and like it hits again as those things happen. But my mum also is disabled and has been my whole life. She developed MS not long after I was born, so like she's 30 years down the line from me, and she said it's still like, I actually said to her, does it ever stop like hitting you when things happen, like you know, missing out? And she was like, no, like you just live with it.
I must admit, I've always been very grateful as well that my condition's kind of just stagnant one. So like, it is what it is, and you can learn to adapt. Whereas something where it's progressive is a big challenge. But I can imagine as well, it's almost was nice to have that reassurance from, I imagine, your mum having been through something similar, to at least be like, I've never done this before. What's happening?
Yeah.
At least, I suppose, was that some comfort? Yeah,
and I think growing up with a mum who was disabled, I didn't have the stigma. Like, I didn't have the internalized ableism of like, oh, I can't use a wheelchair, that's not right, or you're too young to do this, or too young to use a stick, or like that just wasn't there. And we've like adapted things over the years, and she's like carried on living her life. And so it was never like a question of what do we do? It just came really naturally to just adapt, like, and do things how I now need to do them. Like, there wasn't that. I really feel for everyone who becomes disabled and has grown up in a non-disabled family and has absolutely no connection to it, and is suddenly like a fish out of water, and also has all that stigma like in their own head.
It's so tricky, isn't it? Like, I always bang on about people asking questions about disabilities and relate it back to the fact that people only know what they know. So if they've never been exposed to someone with a disability, they're going to ask stupid questions. We all do. I'm probably going to ask stupid questions about farming in about 10 minutes. So like, it's about allowing people to learn, but then also allowing people to grow on their own in terms of like, be someone's guide as best you can. Like, obviously I wouldn't be able to comment on every condition, but I can give you sort of basics in terms of where to find support, how to get your first wheelchair, those sorts of things.
Exactly.
But yeah, it's so tricky. And I think you touched on another point that I get really passionate about, which is people realizing that aids and mobility aids aren't the enemy.
Yeah.
When I realised, particularly in the cerebral palsy community, there's a big push of like, you got to use your walking frame. You got to use your walking frame. You got to get up on your feet because you've got to be as normal as you can be.
Yeah.
Whereas actually, I had a big realisation around 16 where I was like, I don't get me wrong, I like using my walking frame, but if I'm sat in my wheelchair, I can still use my hands. I can still move about. I'm not tired all the time. Plus, I have a portable seat. It just made life a lot more enjoyable.
Yeah.
But there was this stigma that even my mum had of like, no, you got to use your walking frame. You got to use your walking frame because you need to get stronger. You need to get better. And it's like, we all know my cerebral palsy isn't going to just up and leave. Like, it's there. It's a thing. If I'm comfortable, I'm comfortable. And I stand by now, moving to my wheelchair was probably the best decision I made. Then adding on an electric addition to it gave me so much freedom.
Exactly.
So much freedom.
They're not prisons. Like, I don't know why they have so much stigma with them. Like, you use the age you need to make life easier. Like, that's so hard. People wear glasses or drive a car. Like,
yeah. It's like technically, I suppose everyone's got a level of visual impairment when you think of it that way.
Yeah.
Like, I had a discussion with a friend the other day of like, everyone's disabled to an extent because 95% of the population wear glasses.
Exactly.
Now, if we're nitpicking, you have a visual impairment. Now, that's not me saying, like, that's not me hating on the visually impaired community, because being a person with glasses and being visually impaired are two separate things. But if you're looking at it from a bird's eye view, everyone's in that camp, and it's really interesting. And it's also brings me on to that point of like the way people treat wheelchairs. Like I'm thinking like when you go traveling, but even in general, people just grab hold of wheelchairs, throw them about, or grab hold of aids and throw them about. When actually I always sit and go, that's a really expensive set of legs if you want to put it in that level of context.
Yeah. Like, they just don't understand, do they? They think it's just a pile of metal that they think you're just giving them from the NHS, and it's just free. Yep.
And also they think that we can just get them repaired in seconds, and it's like, I wish that was the case. It is crazy. Coming on to your work on social media, obviously you touched on it a bit at the beginning, but what made you dive into social media and blogging and wanting to get involved in that space?
Well, I've always had this, like, before anything ever happened, like, my plan was to grow up, farm, and sell like meat from the farm and encourage people to learn more about farming and stuff. So I was trying to figure out how I could do that now. And I figured that all has to be online. And then I was like, if I try and sell meat online, I'm going to have to actually talk about myself to like share that. And at that point, it was like 2018. And I was thinking, I can't like be the face of something. I can't put myself out there. So I was like, okay, I'll start an Instagram account and just go from there. So I like started an Instagram account, started engaging with like the disabled community and the chronic illness communities on there, and like found a way of accepting being me kind of thing, and not trying to hide bad days or hide that I need to wear tinted glasses because the light's too bright, or like all those things that normally you'd like take off for the camera and like take a photo trying to look as healthy as possible. And then I found a way of just existing and like grew it from there.
It's really interesting. Like a lot of people go through that whole thing of like, as you say, trying to look as healthy as possible. So like it makes me think of like the one question I get all the time, because I've done stuff on relationships in the past, is do you include your disability or your wheelchair or your aid in your photos or descriptions in your dating profile? And I always sit there and go, at the end of the day, it's a bit of a catch-22, because they're going to find out anyway. So you're tearing off the Band-Aid before it happens. But then on the flip side, it might get someone in. But it's interesting that we always go down that route of like trying to look as healthy as possible, when actually like you probably look healthier. Like in my context, I probably look healthier using my aid than not using my aid, because I probably look like I'm really struggling.
Yeah, same.
It's not.
Exactly. It's like it probably looks worse.
It is. It's interesting that we always go down that route. And you touched on, obviously, that a lot of your social media stuff is around wanting to get people into farming. The other question I want to ask is, as we touched on at the beginning, farming and wheelchairs and disability don't tend to mix very well from a bird's eye view.
No.
So obviously you grew up with it. So you obviously want to get back into it as it was something that you were involved in as a child. So how has that adaptation process been of wanting to be back out there and getting involved in the farm, but obviously the way you do that changing completely?
Yeah, it was definitely tough because it is not an accessible industry in general. There are lots of jobs within it, and it's opened my eyes up to that now. Being disabled and not being able to do the physical stuff, it's opened my eyes up to just how many jobs within the industry there are, and that's something I'm really passionate about. That people know that there is analysts and consultants and stuff that is more brain based or technology based or office based that still actually runs the farms kind of thing. That's been a hard thing to get my head around, that the stuff I can contribute is mostly admin stuff, but that actually without that admin stuff we can't function at all. No one would pay us, we wouldn't be able to sell anything, we wouldn't be able to get through any of the red tape. There's so many things that go into running a farm that aren't the physical stuff. So that's been an eye-opener to do that and realise that actually is a job. Because typically, when I was a child, obviously, I'm a girl, and people did say, oh, the boys will farm, because I've got two cousins, and people did go, oh, the boys will farm, you're really clever, you can do the paperwork side. So shunned it our whole childhood. I'm not doing that. I can farm just as much as they can. So then to get to this point and be oh, I have got to do the paperwork. But it's made me realise that is actually a proper job. And outside, we have adapted quite a lot. My dad, luckily, is quite good with his hands, and he put tractor tyres on my powered wheelchair, with a tractor tread.
That's cool. That's really cool.
He hasn't quite perfected it because it does rub on the mud guards at the moment because they're a bit bigger than the other wheels.
Yep.
But it has meant that I don't get stuck as much.
I have the same. So obviously not in the farming context, but we had the same with my walking frame and creating beach wheels.
Oh yeah.
And basically what my dad did is, the golf trolley wheels, the plastic ones. He basically got one of my old sets of wheels, took the wheels off and replaced them with the bigger wheels.
Oh, that's clever.
It's a game changer. And the amount of people that stop me and they're like, where did you get these? And I'm like, my dad made them. And the amount of times I'm sat there my dad wasn't as busy as he is. I would definitely turn around to him and be like, right, Dad, I've got your next business venture.
Same here. Definitely. That's really good. I'm going to steal that because I go walker and I sometimes go out into the garden with it, and the amount of times it's got stuck on a bit of the grass and folded up, or one time it folded up and went straight over, and the dog just looked at me what are you doing on the floor? They're such tiny wheels, aren't they?
It is. It's tiny wheels and also badly designed wheels. It's often bad. Because I think as well, in the context of walkers, it's often that you basically should only use them inside and you only use them for a short amount of time rather than actually using them for your day-to-day life. And then they're not built for that constant battle of mud, rubbish, everything going on to them. It's interesting. It seems like no one that designs these products goes, how are they actually used? It's all very medical.
Yeah, I don't think they expect us to go into the world, to be fair. They probably just think we live at home.
How dare we go out? How dare we do stuff that interests us?
Exactly. How dare we have a life? I mean, I'm pretty sure the company that Quickie, who the brand of my wheelchair, would turn in the grave basically if they saw me herding cows in a field with it. Because with the tractor tyres, I herd the cows and go in, and I mean, the other day I did get stuck up to the axles, but only because my dad said, you can go through there. And I could not.
Yeah, that's often the case of dads going, you can do that, and you're looking at it going, I'm not so sure. And they're like, yeah, you'll be fine. Nope. And then it's normally mum has a go at them.
Yeah.
That's the normal routine. Mum's like, oh, I could have told you wouldn't have got through there. And I'm like, here we go.
Yeah, she was watching from the window. I came in and I was like, Dad got me such that I saw.
Yeah.
Like, oh dear.
Well, he's in the doghouse now. But so like what? So you've obviously said about the big wheels. What else have you adapted to support your in and around the farm?
So I found that like pushing gates and stuff, I like tie things to gates to like pull it after me and stuff like that. Yeah. Stuff that like people, like non-disabled people, see it and go, "Oh, that's such a good idea." And it's like, isn't it obvious? You just tie them into a gate, and like we're quite lucky because it is our farm, so my dad's quite on it with making sure there's slopes instead of steps, obviously, and like if there is steps, making the slopes more gentle to get round it and stuff like that, and putting gates in where it's not going to be that muddy so I can still get in. And like in winter time, the cows all come in the sheds, and he put cameras up in all the sheds so that I can watch them from my phone or from the TV inside and see when, because ours calve, they give birth in February onwards, all in the sheds, so I can watch them, see one giving birth, call someone if it looks like it's a problem, or drive out to the shed and nip through the barrier that has like gaps that I can fit through, and go and do whatever needs to be done, because I can walk about 8 meters with a stick. So I can like walk in, do whatever I need to do if I can reach, and come out. And I found that a lot of our handling stuff with the cows, I can sit next to where it's called a crush. It's where the cows go in and they get held like in a cage, and you can do things to them. And so I can sit next to it, work all the head part that locks them in, give them injections and stuff, and go out and let them out, and found that you can actually do that from sitting down. So who needs legs?
It's amazing. Like I always say, disabled people, we're the best problem solvers because we often have to find a solution, so we will find one. It'll be weird and wonderful, but it'll work. But it's really nice to hear, like, you pretty much sounds like you've managed to resolve most things. Obviously, a lot of credit goes to your dad, and the same for me. A lot of credit goes to my dad. Oftentimes, my dad's a builder, so oftentimes I go to my dad, I need this, and then about a week later he'll go, oh yeah, I got that thing you wanted me to make, and I'm like, I said that off the cuff. I didn't actually want you to make it, but thank you.
They can turn their hand to anything, can't they? Like,
yeah.
Very handy.
And they always make it look remarkably simple. They kind of look at you as like, yeah, I made that. And you're like, surely you had to spend a lot of time on it. And it's like, no, I just did it. And I'm like, okay, fine.
Yeah.
Crack on, Dad.
My dad's latest thing is he thinks that he can attach frisbees to the casters of the wheelchair to like glide over the manure and mud and potentially sand. I'm not 100% sure he's correct, but he's determined to try. And apparently I've got to try it.
It's an interesting theory. I would argue that the golf trolley wheels might be a better one because the width and the no air that might be better on that one. But it'd be interesting to see how it works.
Yeah, no doubt I'll be like stuck somewhere. You'll have to come and get me out.
At least someone's there to drag you back out.
Exactly. There's always a tractor around that can come and get me.
You also mentioned like when you started your social media and your blogging, it was all about sort of getting people to know where their food comes from. What was one thing that you wish you could tell the wider community about where their food comes from, like sort of how to get the best quality, how to support your local farmers? Now there's loads on like loads of big companies are pushing this at the moment, but I want to hear it from like a person on the inside rather than, oh, we're doing this because it's a good thing for our marketing.
Yeah, I know it's the big thing, isn't it?
Yeah,
I'd say that, like, I know from people in the city probably feel like they're really disconnected, but actually what you buy really does change the landscape of the countryside that you go and visit. Like, you can literally change things that are happening by putting your money where you want it to go. So like putting it into higher welfare, like meat that's not come from abroad, like making sure it is British. It has got, I mean, there's like a debate, but it has got that red tractor logo, that, or it has come from an actual farm, like from the farm shops or something. I mean, I know people in the proper city, like in the middle of London, you won't find many farm shops, will you? But
yeah. I mean, in the centre, definitely, but more. So my area is about 40 minutes outside the city. We're Kent. We're the Garden of England.
Yeah.
That everyone goes on about. Actually, it's not as fabulous as everyone makes it sound.
Very dry, isn't it?
Yeah, it's very dry. It's just, the thing is, everyone, like I say, it's still very citified. So like, it's not, everyone sort of sees it as this like, it's all pretty flowers or it's fields. There is definitely fields, but there is also massive roads going through them as well.
Yeah, I'm Leeds, and like literally we're not proper countryside. We're like, if you look one way over the road, you've got like city, and if you look the other way, you've got fields, but with like main roads going past. So it's, but wherever you are, you can, even like in the supermarket, no matter what you like, I know not everyone can afford to buy from the farm shops or from straight from the farm or something, but just making sure it was British just supports us who are actually doing things that other countries maybe don't have to do, like looking after nature and stuff. Like, there's a long way to go still, but we're trying, and we do have a lot more rules than a lot of other countries. And that can only happen if people continue to buy the British stuff. Like, if no one's buying it, there is nothing we can do, is there? We have to make profit in order to function.
Yeah. Have you found that the demand's gone up massively?
Well, we don't sell straight from the farm yet, but I know during COVID, when it was the pandemic lockdowns, not the pandemic, we're still in that, when it was the lockdowns, I know the local dairy farm, where they also have milk bottling and they sell their own milk, they like ran out of bottles. Like, so many people wanted milk delivered to the door, but then as soon as everything opened up again, a lot of people cancelled their orders and went back to buying at the supermarket. So I think it's ebbs and flows, doesn't it? Especially in like nowadays, with people being so tight on money, it's not a priority for people to go and buy straight from a farm shop or something, is it, when you can go to a supermarket and do your whole shop?
Yeah, it's interesting because I mean, this is a really overarching question, and I'm not expecting you to know the answer. But I'm also would be intrigued to see if there's been any change now that veganism is quite popular, and see if that's had any impact on it. Probably would have shifted, because I like almost pushed more towards the wheat and the grain element rather than the meat and the dairy products. That would be a really interesting thing to do some research into.
Yeah, I think I saw one of the companies that's like a levy board that sorts, I should know this, sorts like the government out in making sure that they're thinking about things, and lobbies to get markets opened up in other countries and stuff, and like helps keep things going. I think they did a thing, and I think they said that the meat sales hadn't changed and that dairy had gone up or something. I guess because even though veganism grows, population grows, doesn't it? So
yeah, it's a good point.
I don't think it's made much of a difference, apart from like online activists getting quite nasty. Like, you get trolls.
Yeah.
But I mean, I know a lot of vegans, because I'm like in both communities, like the farming and the disabled community. Like, I feel like I kind of bridged them a bit on my page. Like, there's like 50-50. And so there's a lot of people who are vegan that are my friends, and they're lovely, and they just love that, even though they don't eat the animal products or anything, they love that there are farms that are looking after their animals in a really good way, and that they can see how well looked after they are. I think that's the thing, like, whatever you eat, a farmer had to supply it, like, in the first place. So you're still supporting British farming, whether you're buying meat, eggs, bread, like whatever. And farming is actually all connected. Like, we only produce beef from our cows, and then we produce crops, which is like wheat and oats and stuff. But the cows, the milk from the cows goes onto the crops and grows the crops. So like the crops that go in to become like potentially vegan products have been fertilized by the cows, and we couldn't do that if we didn't have the cows. So it's like all connected.
That's really interesting, because I mean, again, I said I was going to ask stupid questions.
There's no such thing.
One. I never would have thought like you would have used, I don't know, unused dairy, or I would never have thought that would have worked on crops.
Yeah, the manure that they produce while they're inside. Like,
oh, I suppose that makes sense. I was more thinking, I just had an image in my head of you just putting milk on the crops, and I was like,
well, no.
Didn't think that.
But sometimes people feed pigs the waste milk, or like if they've got spare milk, like small farms will, but like big farms won't have any waste milk, because it all goes to a processor, and the only waste milk would be something that we're not allowed to give anything, so it just goes down the drain, unfortunately. But yeah, all the manure and and also like it works the other way, and the veg producers give the livestock farmers the veg that didn't make the cut for the supermarkets, so then that doesn't just go to waste, and then again they get the muck back and grow veg better because they've got some fertilizer for it. It
seems that the farming industry is just way ahead when it comes to sustainability. I don't need this, you need this, here you go.
Exactly. It's very like all in a cycle, so you can't kind of take one piece out. So even if the veg and like grain sale goes up because of veganism, that still helps the whole like system.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Like, half of this I would never have thought of. Also, as a young person in farming, how has that experience been? Because I heard on a podcast you were on previously, even you said yourself, it's very much like if you stereotype farming, it's sort of your big butch men or your old men working on the farm, and that's the kind of stereotype that's given. So as like a young person, what's your experience been, and what would be your hope to get more young people into farming?
Yeah, it's. I think the average age is like, I want to say 65, I think, or like 58, something like that. The average age of the British farmer, which obviously is not very sustainable in the long run because it's a very physical job. But there is a lot of young people in it. It's just so hard to get into. Like, obviously, I'm really lucky. I was born on a farm. Like, it's really hard for people who weren't, but it's not impossible. It's just hard because they're obviously not making any more land, are they? So there's a lot of competition for land, and it's just tough. There's not like much money in it to like build up your like reserves of money to buy anything. Kind of thing. But there is a lot of young people, especially like you can see them all on social media. Like obviously my dad's generation, they're not really on social media, but social media is mostly the younger people, and it's really promising because, you know, we bring new ideas and every generation improves something. And I think like they do need to get more young people in, which they're doing. They've got a thing called Farmer Time, and the farmers sign up and do video calls with schools once a month, I think.
That's cool.
Different classes. Really cool. And I guess that's how you get in, isn't it? You get into the schools right from the start and make it look appealing.
Yeah, I mean, I still stand by that. I come back off that school trip and was like, that was hard labour. But when I was primary school, I went and worked on a farm on a school trip for a week in Wales.
Oh gosh.
And it was the hardest week of. Bear in mind, I was about like we had the conversation about walking frames. At that time, I was spending as much time as I could on my walking frame. So I'm like wading my way through treacle of the mud that is the Welsh, because we were right by the coast as well. So like the wind was brutal, rain was brutal. I came back from that trip, and even Mum said, she was like, "You lost half a stone in a week."
Yeah, I think
it was.
I don't think that kind of encourages kids to get into farming, to be fair.
You say that, but although I sit there and go, I was knackered. Now I look back on it and I'm like, a really cool experience just to see. Like, it was all the things like we'd milk goats, we'd get up in the mornings, muck out the pigs, do all that stuff. Like, it was different. And obviously at the time it was like, why the hell has mum sent me on this trip? But now when I look at it, I'm like, actually, that was a really cool thing to do.
Yeah.
And also it's really nice because obviously doing it in a school context is very like communal. Like, I'm not Mr. Old Man of like, no, we shouldn't use iPads. I mean, I love tech, but it was really nice to be like, none of us really had our phones. We were all just kind of chilling but then also going out and working. But it also taught us where it all comes from, and I suppose that is another thing that we need to kind of tap into to get young people into it, is like showing them actually this teaches you where everything comes from, what you should be more mindful of. And then I suppose it all feeds up the chain, I suppose.
Absolutely. And like the more children that find it interesting of what's in the food and like where it comes from, and that they can actually be a part of that. That's what like makes me kind of so excited to be in farming. Like the thought that I'm part of the food that ends up on someone else's plate, because even though our crops go off to like big mills, or our cattle go off and they're on supermarket shelves, like they just go to the supermarket, but those animals are going to be eaten by somebody, and we've like raised them and been part of that from the day they were born. And it's just being part of that cycle. And I think children also would find that quite addictive, to be part of that cycle. Like they like that kind of thing, don't they?
Yeah, I think, as I say, being part of it, it's like, even as someone who just casually grows fruit and veg, like even that's quite rewarding, and like everyone loves it. So as I say, bringing kids into it, I think my only concern is that whole squeamish side of it, of essentially educating children to say, how this ends up on your plate is this needs to happen.
Yeah, like I think that's where they need to get in there early, because like I grew up here, and we'd literally sit at the table, me and my cousins, and we'd go, oh, is this Patrick? As we tucked into the sausages. Like, honestly, it was just so that the friends would come round and they'd sit at the table and go, oh, this is Pinky. And they would look mortified. And it was like, when you hear it from the start, and you see that they're having a good life, and you see that you see them grow, and you see that they're not like cute little babies by the time they actually get to like meat size and get to the size that they're going to be killed at, and that they're actually pretty scary when they get to then. Like, you kind of like, it's different. Whereas when you grab like a random 12-year-old and you say that, oh, you're eating lamb and that was skipping around in the fields 5 months ago, like they look mortified. And it's like, if we got there earlier, like early primary school, it would just be more normal, wouldn't it? Like our parents and grandparents' generation, they weren't detached from it, were they?
No, and I think as well, it's that whole thing, like I've spoken about earlier, and I'd say I've got friends that are vegan, friends that are vegetarian. I haven't got a problem with it, but it does worry me, like the increase in those communities. I then worry that some of that is stemmed from people almost being quite squeamish and standoffish once they realise where the meat comes from. Like I remember even with my cousin, she watched one documentary and then for a year she was a vegetarian. It's
even
like,
my cousins have done that, and they literally have grown up across the field from a farm and go into it every single day. Like they've done that. Like my dad has been like, why are you saying that it's cruel? Like, I think everyone can choose what they're comfortable eating. And quite controversially, I think that if someone can't like fathom in the head and can't let themselves think about that this on their plate was an animal, I don't think you should eat meat. Like, that might be a controversial stance. But I do think that out of respect for the animal that has died to produce that meat, you should be aware that that was an animal and that had a life and that had a good life, hopefully. And to know then that what you're buying, you're trying to buy stuff from something that did have a good life. And I don't think you should eat meat if the thought of it being an animal freaks you out and you can't bear to think of that while you're eating it. Like, I don't think that's respect for the animal.
I completely agree, because then as well, like, you're saving yourself, the person eating the meat, you're saving yourself like an internal conflict of like, I want to eat this, but I'm also aware that I'm not comfortable with where this actually comes from.
Yeah, like people who eat it and have to like pretend that that wasn't an animal and that that was never living. Like,
yeah,
I think that kind of disconnect does them a disservice, does like the animals a disservice. They just become a thing on a plate.
On the flip side, and I know as well, one of our previous guests, it was one of her not quite politically correct opinions, was vegan meats. Like, I still struggle to wrap my head around it, because I'm like, if you don't want to eat meat, why do you want to eat something that looks and tastes like meat? It don't make sense.
Yeah, unless I guess if you don't eat meat because of a health problem that you can't eat it, I can see that you need to have it look and taste like it because you might fancy that. But I don't understand like the militant people who are literally like with the plaques at farms, like blocking abattoirs and stuff. I don't see how they then want to go home and eat something that says tastes like chicken. Like you.
Yeah, it's a weird concept. I mean, it's hard as well, because I'm very much a carnivore, and very much grew up with like a very varied diet and never had an issue with it. So it's often I feel like I can't comment on it because I've never done it. But then the concept of it just throws me, because I sit there and go, why would you want to eat bacon that's not bacon but it tastes like bacon, but it's I just don't understand it.
Like plants are delicious. Like let them taste of plants. Like and like beans and stuff. Like we eat very like varied diet, and we make sure that we have meals that are meat free, like throughout, just because A, finances, and B, like we tend to try and we eat all our own beef, and we buy pork and lamb and chicken, but we buy from like farm shops or like the online farm shops, which obviously is a bit more expensive. So like we do have meat-free meals every week to kind of spread it out, and also just vary your diet. Like
mix it up.
And eat something else. Like, and they're lovely. Like you don't need something that tastes like the thing you're trying not to eat. But then if some people like that, then it's not harming.
I think it all comes. I think the thing I'm always finding just with it is like whenever I'm like putting together a vegetarian dish, it's almost like that you have to get over that whole thing of like the meat and two veg mentality of like, right, this is the carb source, this is the protein source, and that's sort of how most people build their food. So then when you look at it from a vegetarian perspective, you're like, right, there's a bit of broccoli on there, now where do I go?
I know, I really have like respect for people who do eat vegan and vegetarian all the time, because it is hard to come up with meals. Like it is so hard, and they're so limited. Like when they go out to restaurants, they have like one meal on the menu. What if you had like all those dietary requirements that you could have, and you couldn't even eat that? Like I do have like a lot of respect for them to be able to eat enough to sustain themselves when it is quite limited, and you have to think so hard about what you're cooking. Like it's a lot easier to just chuck some chicken in a pasta.
Yeah, and I think, like you say, it's that whole thing of having to go out for dinner is not as much of an experience for anyone that has any dietary requirements, because we're still catching up to give them the options. So like someone like me who has very limited dietary requirements, it's very much, I look at a menu and there's probably like 30 things I can eat on that menu. Whereas like you say, if you're vegetarian or vegan, you have the choice of like 1, 2, possibly 3, depending on the restaurant you go to.
I know, I have friends who like have lots of dietary requirements, and it would make them really ill if they ate them. And, you know, it's like someone produces something that they can eat and it's like, yay, that's a friendly one. Like, that's tummy friendly. Like, I mean,
the other thing that's insane, like oftentimes I'm the organizer. So like if we go out for dinner or we do something, or I'm also tend to be the main cook out of our group of friends, I suppose. And like, it is so stressful either trying to create a vegan or vegetarian meal or trying to find a restaurant that's vegan or vegetarian.
It's really hard, isn't it? Like, But yeah, my view is that whatever you eat, whether you're vegan or vegetarian, it doesn't matter to me. Even though we are beef producers, like, it doesn't matter to me anyway at all. Like, eat whatever you have to eat, and it's accessible for you to eat. And whatever it is you're eating, you're still supporting British farming if you're buying British, whether that's veg, beans, peas, like anything. Like, it's all so connected that it doesn't matter how many vegans there are. And vegans are hopefully helping push to make things better anyway. Like, the fact that you've got people pushing for something makes you want to do better.
Completely agree. And I completely agree with that point of, like, it doesn't matter what you eat, because I view vegan and vegetarianism as the same as, like, if you don't like carrots, don't eat carrots.
Exactly. It's just not a problem.
It's like, it's not necessarily I'm this, I'm that. It's like, oh, that person doesn't, I almost prefer the context of, like, that person doesn't like meat. Yeah. Because it's the same thing. It's like, I don't like mushrooms.
Animal products. Like,
yeah.
I know a lot of people who are vegan and don't like, I know people who have to say, like, plant-based because they don't like associating with the, like, nasty vegans that go and attack people. I mean, I've heard from friends who are vegan who have been, like, completely trolled because they happen to take a medication that has something in it that isn't vegan. It's like, well, they have to take it. Like, you can't just, like, that's
there's
not
only
their
so
fault.
much control.
Like, it doesn't mean they don't care about animals. Like, there's only so much you can't damage your health.
Yeah. And I'm a big advocate as well of, like, like, some families are trying to just reduce the amount of meat. And I think it's the same thing. It's like, no one's perfect 100% of the time. Being a fitness freak, I still eat a chocolate bar every now and again. Like,
exactly. I just think whatever people want to do it. Like, and it's really lovely. I always find it really lovely when friends who I know are vegan, like enjoy the things that I put out about the cows or something. Like, they just love seeing the cows. They know that they don't eat them, but they don't care that someone else does. Like,
yeah. I think that's the sort of final point, really, is that whole thing of just let people do what they want. It's just, that is my ethos for pretty much everything, of just let people do what they want. If they're happy doing it, let them crack on.
If it's not hurting you.
Exactly. Where do you see farming going, like, in the future? Because, as you said, land's getting, there's less land available. There's more demand on you guys. There's a lot going on in terms of, like, mass farming. So honestly, where do you see it going in the future?
I honestly don't know. Like, the government is not very good at protecting British farming. It's doing a lot of trade deals with countries that don't have as high standards, and, you know, the cost of living is going up, so people are going to be forced to buy the cheaper stuff, like the cheaper veg flown in, or the cheaper meat. Like,
yeah.
But at the same time, there's also a push for, obviously, saving the climate, and farming is very much in the position to help that. Like, if you ignore all the big statistics that, like, the big companies like to push out that says that farming's killing the world and that, like, meat's killing the world, if you actually look at the real ones, it's actually helping it, because the animals grazing the places where we can't possibly grow any other food, they're, like, turning grass into food that we can eat. And the more they eat that grass, the more it grows and takes in carbon from the atmosphere, puts it in the soil. Like, our grassland soils are so much higher in what's called organic matter than the arable soils. And that organic matter is made of carbon, like, that has been taken from the atmosphere. So, like, if we can increase the carbon in the soils by using the animals, we take carbon from the atmosphere to make that. There's a big thing about carbon credits that my dad was talking about the other day, that companies are on about paying farms to increase the organic matter so that they can have the carbon credits and be carbon neutral. And I don't agree with that, but
That is dodgy, very
Exactly.
dodgy.
I think that's just passing the buck on their part, isn't it?
Yeah, that's essentially cooking the books, or like laundering money. It's the same context of
Exactly.
how can I get away with this?
Yeah, how can I get away with this? Oh, they're already capturing carbon with the land. So if we say that we own that carbon, then we're carbon neutral. Like, it's...
Also, what would be the draw, I suppose, for farmers to do that?
Well, they get paid like per percent or per acre or something. Like,
yeah.
But I don't think many would. We definitely wouldn't do it. Like, you know, there's schemes that come out to like encourage us to do more to protect nature and stuff. Like, there's always schemes that a lot of us are in, and some of those schemes do focus on like capturing carbon. I don't know why you'd then want to give that carbon to a company that wasn't doing anything else. Like, surely they should.
Yeah.
Surely it's up to the big companies to get their emissions better.
Carbon, get them down to carbon neutral. And that makes, like, as both of us work on social media, and you sit there and you think, even then, like, can you imagine the wider public find out that statistic of actually we're not actually carbon neutral, we just paid some farmer in somewhere to take our carbon.
Yeah.
Like, it would cause like marketing like meltdown because no one would know what to do.
It's like when they say that like they buy a tree in the rainforest or something. It's like, well, that tree was already there. Like,
yeah. I never get that. Like, when companies are like, "Oh, you spent so much money with us, we'll plant a tree." It's like, plant the tree anyway.
Yeah.
Like,
and like, where are you planting it? And what tree? Like,
and also, I've got no evidence to say that you ever planted the tree. I'm just reading what Google says.
I know. I think the spotlight's going to like continue to be on, obviously, nature and climate change. And I hope that people are going to realise we are part of the solution and not the problem, because that's like banging your head against a brick wall.
Yeah, it's the big point that I start getting a bit showy with whenever it's mentioned in terms of, oh, I'm doing my bit for the planet because I have changed my diet, or I'm doing this, that, the other. And actually, when it comes to animals, don't actually, they have an impact, but the impact is far greater, far less than people think.
Yeah, and than like flying and cars and stuff.
Yeah.
Like, there's a lot more to go, isn't there? And
I think as well, it's for me with the whole argument of environmental, is also, you can't, unfortunately, people are going to do what people are going to do. I think we need to focus on the energy of like, these are the things we currently do. How can we make them greener, rather than, oh, you should use your car less. Oh, obviously, in the context of little changes, I agree with. But like, you're never going to get the entire world to go, we're never going to fly a plane ever again.
Exactly.
It's not going to happen.
Just like little things, like, and on the like animal products part, I'd rather people bought from somewhere that was trying to like farm in a nature friendly way and just bought less of it if it's more expensive, than bought from like Brazilian beef, say. Like,
yeah,
you know, I'm all for them not buying the products that are produced in a non-sustainable way. Like, and if that's your price point, that you can only afford that, then by all means, don't eat animal products. Like, don't feel like you have to just because you want to like be seen as supporting farming when you can't actually afford to buy it from a sustainable source.
Yeah, and I think that's the conversation of like, obviously a lot of the stuff when it comes to being better in the environment, that does sometimes have a cost knock-on effect. And at the end of the day, like I always say to friends, you got to look after number one. If that's not something you can do, unfortunately, it's not something you do. You can't force it to happen. It's just about making the changes where you can. Exactly.
Especially like disabled people have been thrown under the bus, haven't they, with like the climate change stuff, like having to use plastic straws and stuff. And it's like, why are you punishing us? Like,
don't get me started on that argument.
Like, if that's what you need, and like, if you need to buy pre-chopped veg, and people saying, well, that's loads more carbon, like that's loads more emissions to do that. Like, leave us alone. Like,
I got to do what I got to do. Like the paper straw one, I just get annoyed at because it's a really it's a really like individual thing, and I know it's unnecessary, but it's just when it comes to McDonald's milkshakes, those straws just disintegrate. Shouldn't be used. Why are we using them? There's got to be a better, more sustainable way, but also a more like rigid straw that you can use.
And penalising people for what they eat or how they eat it or how they cook it, like, doesn't help. Like,
no.
Realistically, what will change? Like, that'll change a tiny % of the emissions if everyone ate in a certain way. Like, leave people alone to eat how they need to eat.
It's like the whole argument as well of like people, disabled people using more electricity because we've got our aids or our machines that support us.
Yeah.
And it's like, we have to use them. Like,
exactly.
That's probably one of my biggest concerns when it comes to the cost of living. Now, I'm really lucky that I still live with my parents. My costs are significantly reduced. But whenever I think of moving out with my partner, I'm like, Jesus Christ, whenever I plug in my like electric attachment, like every time that's going to cost me a fortune. But then literally it helps me just get from A to B. Like,
exactly. I mean, we've had power cuts before and we've been like, well, what do we do? Got the stair lift. How do we get up and down the stairs, like in a power cut?
Oh, yeah.
And then it was like, we have to use this electricity. Like, there is no way around it.
Yeah, I never thought about that. I know there's certain schemes that I know friends have used of like almost you're on like a priority list when it comes to electricity and stuff like that. But yeah, it's those little things that people don't realise.
Like, you have to use it to live.
Yeah, I especially like if you're using anything like a dialysis machine or anything like that. It's like, no, this is legit keeping me alive. Yeah. I have no choice.
The celebrities flying private jets everywhere can sort their own things out. Leave us alone.
Although, actually, as a last question, one question I wanted to ask you, is there anything that you, obviously working in the agricultural space, in the farming space, is there anything that, like, as much as you've done it all your life, that you still hate to this day doing? Because, like, for me, I always think, I always cast my mind back of, like, when I did horse riding as a kid. I loved horse riding in the summer. In the winter, it was like the devil's food. I just didn't want to go. I was in this shed that I swear it was colder in the shed than it was outside. But is there anything that you said, anything that I still really don't enjoy this, no matter how many times I do it?
Paperwork.
Fair enough. I think that's a universal one.
Yeah, paperwork. Give me anything outside any day. Do the paperwork. Also, I have to do the paperwork, but it's.
I get that. I think as well, like as a disabled person, there is so much unnecessary paperwork, even without the business side of things, and it's like, why do I have to sign like? I love the PIP argument, and like the amount of forms you have to fill out for that.
The amount of like info you have to do, and then you get the like appointment with the assessor, and they haven't even read it. What do I write it for?
Yeah, or I love my personal favourite is the idea of just this guy turning up at my house looking and going, oh yeah, you're still in the wheelchair. I'm like, what did you think was going to happen, Daniel?
It didn't really. You didn't get a miraculous recovery.
Yeah, it's just crazy.
It is crazy. The only thing like that I don't like about farming is nothing to do with farming. It's being out on the farm. We've got a footpath going straight through the farm. And whenever I'm doing anything, like, you can guarantee I'll be like following cows or doing something. People will walk through and go, oh, are you helping? Are you supervising? Are they doing it right? Nice. And it's like, yeah, I'm part of it.
I'm doing my job.
I'm working.
Fuck off.
Yeah, like, not a child. Actually an adult.
I hate I think that's just a general thing. I still get that at work every now and again, and you're like, I'm fully functioning, absolutely have a clue what's going on and adequately doing my job.
Yep, it's the head tilt you get, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's the head tilt.
Are you okay? And the high-pitched voice.
Yeah.
It's always the high-pitched voice.
Yeah.
or it's the other one of if someone's with you, it's like, oh, he's doing well, isn't he? You know?
Oh, yeah. Like, my mum has obviously had this for like years of people not talking to her. She makes a point of going, excuse me, I'm down here. Like,
My one's always, oh, I speak as well.
yeah, that's a good one.
Actually, one thing I did want to ask, and I forgot to ask during when we were talking about the farming, and you were talking about your big wheels, was how the hell do you deal with muddy, like not bringing mud everywhere in the house and everywhere? Like that's just the thing. Even when I go on like dog walks,
Yeah.
So like, how do you deal with that?
Yeah, the conservatory is very muddy on a regular basis. Luckily that's my outdoor wheelchair, and I'm very grateful to have an indoor one in the house.
Swap over. That makes sense.
Otherwise, honestly, like sometimes in the summer it's too hot to come up to be upstairs in my room, which is where I spend most of my day. So go downstairs, and so then like downstairs I only have a walker normally, but that's only to get literally from the bottom of the stairs to the conservatory. So I'm not like moving around all day down there. So I have to move on to the wheelchair, and then you get mud everywhere because obviously it's an outdoor wheelchair. So we actually bought a manual one to like just sit down there, which like a lightweight one, just because like my arm's not strong enough to actually self-propel much, but just on like wooden floor that's all level, I can get just from A to B, just like
makes sense.
Just to try and save the doorways from the wide wheels and from all the mud.
I just thought I'd ask because my mum is a clean freak, and every time, no matter how much she knows that I will come back from dog walk with muddy wheels, she still gets amazed every time I do it. And I'm like, what did you expect? And also she goes to me like, don't bring that in here. And I'm like,
I can't go anywhere.
The choices are you carry me or...
Hello. Like my dad comes home and is like, oh my God, where have you been? Like, the farm.
Yeah, we live on a farm, Dad.
We literally live on a farm. I took the dog for a walk. That's just what happens. I try and hose it off in the garden, but it like sometimes is so clogged up under the mud guards that it's just like it's just gonna have to fall out when it's dry. And
also it's that whole thing of like I can try my best to clean it off, but still got to move to go somewhere.
Exactly.
So by the time I've moved again, we're still going to be back where we were.
Exactly. And like you drive over where you've just cleaned off, so it's a losing battle. I think we've just accepted. Like my mum's wheelchair, she has an indoor one because she goes to more like hospital appointments than me, because I just tend to like they don't really do anything with ME, so you don't have to go to hospital much. So she goes to more appointments, and so her indoor one is also her hospital one and her outdoor one as well. So it doesn't have like the big wheels on, but now thankfully she has a proper outdoor one, because otherwise she was tracking mud everywhere. Like
that's particularly like just a general keeping the house clean is a bit of a nightmare.
And like cleaning it for hospital appointments was like it's taking hours.
Walk into the hospital and they're like, where the hell have you been?
Exactly. I mean, when I've gone to like christenings or weddings or something, we've like tried as hard as possible to clean it, but it's just, it never looks clean.
But the other thing, like I had a friend go to me the other day, like he's also a wheelchair user, and he was like, oh, I clean my wheelchair every week. And I'm like,
oh my God.
Who the fuck's got time for that?
Who's got the energy?
Yeah, like, and also like there's only, as we just said, there's only so clean you can get a wheelchair, because part of a wheelchair is touching the floor. Like, it's really, I don't know how people do it, but I'm just conscious on time, so I was going to hit you with the last question. I did pre-warn you before we started recording. Now it catches a lot of guests out, but what's one piece of politically correctness that you really strongly agree with or disagree with?
I've been thinking about that. I say, like, I don't know if it's politically correctness, but you know when parents pass you out in a wheelchair or using some kind of mobility aid, and they've got children, and the children start asking them questions, and they just like drag the child away, like, no, you can't say that. Like, I wish they would say to the child, like, oh yeah, it's a wheelchair, and like, just like not feel. It feels like they're trying to be really polite by not mentioning it, but we know we're in a wheelchair. Like, we know it's a wheelchair. You can say it. It's okay.
Yeah.
Like tell your child.
It comes back to that whole thing. Disability is not a dirty, or disabled is not a dirty word.
Yeah.
It's like, it's just a thing. It's around. And most people in our situation, had it for some time, and we've kind of established that, yes, I am a wheelchair user. And I think, because I've had it before where I've thrown a complete curveball at the poor parent and been like, someone's gone, oh, mum, why does he use that? And I've spun around and explained.
Yeah.
And they were mortified. But then I'm sat there like, I'm literally just educating your child. Like, I don't take any offense to it. I'm a bit of a weirdo. I quite enjoy like teaching people about disability. So like, I will sit there and happily explain to the kid in terms they'll understand of, this is why this happens. This is why I've got this. And the funniest thing is they have the like most just standard responses of, oh, cool. And you're like,
cool. I ride a bike. Like,
yeah. What are they expecting the child to ask?
Exactly. Kids don't care. Like, kids just get on with it, don't they?
If anything, adults ask the most strange questions.
Well, yeah, with one question, I was out around the village and someone stopped me thinking I was my mum. And like, there is 30 years between us, so like, it's a little bit offensive. I mean, really good for her. But they were like, Sam. I'm like, I'm Holly. Oh, I thought you were Sam. And then they're like, oh no, are you in a wheelchair too? I was like, yeah.
Ooh,
oh, have you got MS too? I went, no, I've got ME. And then they went, oh, I don't know what's worse. What's worse? Oh, I think MS is worse. And they were there having a conversation with themselves and with the like husband going, oh yeah, MS is worse, isn't it? Like, I'm sat there like, okay, really good conversation.
It's not top
here.
trumps.
Like, this is really awkward. Like,
yeah.
Can you just hold that in? Or like someone walked through and saw my mum and me and went, oh, what accident have you two been in? I'm like, we're disabled. Oh, all right.
I love that one. It's like, what happened to you? And you're like, don't know. It's, or like, the other one's like, did you get hit by a car? And you're like,
do I look like
no.
I did?
Yeah. Oh yeah, I totally have an adapted car, a nice wheelchair, and it only happened to be a week ago. God, you definitely think the NHS is better than it is, don't you?
Yeah. But yeah, the awkward comments are the best, aren't they? Like you say, like top trumps.
But where can people find you?
They can find me at Onegirlandhercows on Instagram, Facebook, or on my website, Onegirlandhercows. They can find me, although I really do need to get better at finding time to write blog posts.
Too busy farming. Thank you so much for coming on. It's been a great conversation. It's also been very different. As I say, I've learned so much. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. It's really, really great.
Thank you so much for tuning into this week's episode of the Not Quite Podcast. Please make sure you follow us on TikTok and Instagram to get regular updates about the podcast.